time for telling her, you're not allowed to have the menorah because it's not Hanukkah yet, and blah, blah. That's what I said. So I asked him.
You're not lighting it. It's just there. What's the big deal?
That's what I said. Right? As long as it's not lit.
It's I assume and I assume it's electric anyway, right?
So
It's not here.
so it's okay either way, right?
And not for
And supposedly we have a rabbi lady, her husband wears a kippah.
Okay.
So I assume that they keep.
Okay, but what's the difference?
Yeah, no, so I don't know if it was her that said something. I don't know who said it. Where is this? Where is this? At our parliamentarian.
And you don't have
No, who do you think they took I'm sure they took the Christmas tree from our Hanukkah lights, right?
Okay. So I'm sorry last week we had to kind of cancel last minute because of the program that took place last week, but today we're here. And what I would like to do is again, not so much in the text itself as last time we covered chapters 40, 41, and 42. I would like to again deal with a couple of aspects of interesting stuff that related to the third temple. Okay. I'm gonna deal with that later. I don't remember what I wanted to. What's that? Okay. So, as we know, on Tisha B'Av, we commemorate the destruction of both Batei HaMikdash, both the first and the second temple. You know, and we fast and the whole thing, and we pray for the rebuild of the third one. But what's interesting is that in Jewish history, there was an attempt to build the third temple. And I'm not so sure exactly, maybe we can discover together, Chazal decided to ignore that completely. On July 19th, the year 362, the Roman Emperor Julianus, or Julian, came to the city of Antioch, which is in the southern part of Turkey today. Even though he was in a war against the Persians at that time, he found time to meet the head of the Jewish community in town. And he asked them, why aren't you sacrificing, bringing sacrifices, animal sacrifices like your ancestors? And the Jews obviously replied to him, well, listen, our temple is destroyed, and we can't do that. And what he said, so go ahead, build it. Go ahead and rebuild it, so you can go back to your old practice. Now, why would he care? Right? Why would he care? Apparently, he had a personal interest in that. So he was born in the year 331. So that means a short time after the emperor switched from persecuting Christianity to accepting and actually adopting Christianity. Okay? Now, so he himself grew up as Christian. However, when he grew up, he discovered the old Roman religion that his fathers, his ancestors practiced. So he started this gradual process of living Christianity. At some point, he was called the heretic, Julianus the heretic. And still the question is, so what's the connection to the Jews? Like, what's the interest? Well, in the Roman religion, they also had animal sacrifices. One of the main differences, or when Christianity kind of evolved, one of the things that they completely, not only that they stopped, but also rejected the whole idea of korbanot, of sacrifices in Christianity, right? So yes, they have, the bread and the wine, and that represents like stuff or whatever. It went through a whole theological change, but there's no sacrificial elements like really in Christianity. Yeah, we don't have them today in Judaism, but theologically, let's put it this way, if Beit HaMikdash is built, theologically could happen. We daven for that, right? Whether that's happened or not, or what form, it's a different story. But we do not, by the way, this is one of the main differences between traditional Judaism and Reformed Judaism. Reformed Judaism completely reject this idea of korbanot, no matter how, no matter in what form, and no matter, this is one of the main differences. And we do not reject that. So you can interpret that in different ways. What does it mean? How it's going to happen? Blah, 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 whatever. Is it going to be animal? Is it going to be grain? Is it going to be whatever? That's all the details. But we do not reject the korban. We say after every Amidah, Sheyibane Beit HaMikdash b'meira v'yameinu, we say all that kind of stuff. Sheta'aleinu v'simcha la'artzenu v'tita'enu v'gvoleinu. There's a lot of prayers that we say. And Reformed Judaism rejected all that stuff. This is why, for example, in Reformed Judaism, there's no Musaf service. Why there's no Musaf service? Because what's the nucleus of every Musaf service is the korbanot, right? It's the psukim where we talk about the korban. Right? That's the nucleus. Or in the regalim, right? Or whatever that is. We quote those psukim from the Torah that talks about those korbanot. And since this is the essence of the Musaf, because what is Musaf? Musaf is what? Additional, but it's additional what? Additional korban. So our service is a remnant or replacement for the korban. If I reject the korban altogether, then I'm not going to have that service as well. Okay, back to Julian. So he grew up as Christian, but he discovered that his ancestors practiced the Roman religion, whatever that means, and it's basically a form of paganism, correct? Which involved also animal sacrifices. And he was drawn to that, and he wanted to restore that. And so he needed to have partners. Who would be a partner? The Jews. Why? Because Judaism also promotes animal sacrifices. However, as you know, Judaism was not that simple. Jews already got used to religion without korbanot for nearly 300 years at that point. Without the temple, without korbanot. So it was not that simple.
Excuse me?
Yes.
What about Korban Chatat?
What's
which
the,
is civil?
what's the difference?
You have to sacrifice, right?
Yeah.
So what is the alternative for this sacrifice? If somebody really feels that he did a lot, and he
The
want to
Tfilot,
compensate,
tshuva, and tefillah.
so this is for Korban Chatat.
All the korbanot.
Oh,
All the korbanot. So he writes a letter to the Jewish community, and he explained to them that his motive is social and religious, and he wants to rebuild Yerushalayim and bring the citizens of Yerushalayim. And he writes, so there, you and I can together give praises to God.
what's the date of this? 851?
No, he was born in 331. He met the Jewish community on the July 19th, 362. So we need to understand something about Judaism, right? Christianity started from Judaism, right? We know that. But at some point, think about it as like, two branches that kind of got separated, right? And that happened because of the destruction of the temple, Mered Bar Kokhba, the rebellion, and all that kind of stuff, right? So what happened in Judaism, instead of like continuing with sacrifices and all that kind of stuff, we took a turn, right? We decided what we're going to do is we're going to do Torah study, and we're going to do tefillah, right? Not only that, let's assume, okay, Kohanim. Okay, so they get the first aliyah, it's little things, it's ceremonial, right? So they minimized the role of the Kohen. What's interesting is that the Christians did the opposite. They sanctified all those rituals, even though it didn't translate. So their language is much more connected to those rituals of the temple, even though they don't. Okay, so there's kind of interesting kind of like movement that happened there. So I'll give you an example. So the role, for example, from the priest Kohen is not that important, but who became like the leader in the Jewish community is the teacher, the rabbi, right? Because we moved from this idea of elite that kind of like has a role or whatever to, well, this is about learning. Anyone can do that. If you learn, you can become a leader, period. That's it. Because what important is learning, right? What about Christianity? In Christianity, the priests are, right? So in a very similar way to what happened back then. The churches at that time were called temples, right? In every church, you have an altar. So there's a lot of that language, even though the rituals are different. So when they eat the bread and the wine, that mimics the rituals of bringing sacrifices. Even today, by the way, some of the communities, some of the Christian communities, that ritual, the mass, is called korbana, even today, right? Yes,
Sacrifice.
correct. Correct.
So the church will continue to continue to be the teachers of the religion and everything else.
Yeah.
They're rabbis.
Okay. So what happened with that story? Let's go back to our story. So here it's apparently, at least there was a group that took that initiative and decided to go back and started building, and we're not exactly sure what happened. He nullified one of the taxes, whatever, that kind of stuff. Fine. And it seems that there was a earthquake when they starting the restoration. That was actually documented, that earthquake, and some Christian sources actually said that there was a fire there as well. Today, scholars claim that we're talking about like all sorts of gases that were underneath the ground, and somehow, I don't know. In any event, they saw that as a sign that shouldn't do that, and they stopped all the work. And this is that story. Now, the question is, yeah.
The attempt to rebuild the Beth Mikdash on its designated place.
Yeah, of course.
No other place.
Yeah, on Temple Mount.
I'm just.
Yes.
Together.
So Chazal almost completely like ignored that completely, except for two kind of little anecdotes in the Talmud, in the Yerushalmi Talmud, both on the name of Rav Acha. One says that the temple can or could be built even before the restoration of the kingdom of the house of David. And the other quote of Rav Acha is that the temple is going to be built in a leap year, I'm sorry, not in a leap year, in a Shemitah year, right? Which the year of 362, 363, right? Last year, 362, 363 was a Shemitah year as well. So anyway, so after that earthquake, everything stopped, and and it seems that because the rabbis, were like on that path of basically changing Judaism to what it is today, which was very different than the time of the temple, but kind of like that event was kind of pushed away and not really documented. And we understand that because in light of the trauma that the destruction of the temple brought, that trauma. And we're talking about, it's only 300 years after, less than 300 years of the destruction of the temple. The temple was destroyed in 70, right? So we're talking about here in 362, 363, less than 300 years after. You can understand that the new methodology, or this new way of practicing Judaism, was not yet established. So this is why it was not also documented and given. Okay. What I want to do is I want to go into another fascinating story to the 20th century. The Balfour Declaration. Okay, November 2nd, 1917. In Zionism, in Zionist circles, everybody thought, okay, this is new. This is like finally, right? This is okay. But what had happened at the same time, all of a sudden, people started thinking about other issues, new issues, like that were not discussed for 2,000 years. Because if we're going to have a Jewish home or a home for the Jewish people in Israel, oh, we have to start thinking. Up until now, up until that point, nobody dealt with issues of temple or Jewish government or all that kind of stuff that was not relevant for 2,000 years. So all of a sudden, all those questions starting to bubble. And one of the main questions that both traditional and non-traditional Jews that wanted to try to, how to call it, impact or influence how this state, this Jewish state is going to look like, one of those questions that deal with that is the temple and sacrifices. What does it mean for us? Well, back then, for them, like more than 100 years ago. So, Harav Avraham Yitzchak Cohen Cook, Harav Cook, who was the chief rabbi of Israel at the first third of the 20th century. Interesting. He took like a serious turn about his view of the Third Temple. In 1918, okay, right after the end of World War I, Rav Kook writes very, very explicitly, very clearly that he supports building the temple and the renewal of the avodah, of the service of the korbanot. Very clear. 3 years later, he said, it's not that simple. We need a sign. We need perhaps Elijah to come and tell us. We need the Mashiach to as a sign for that. So he does like almost 180-degree change. What happens? Okay, so how that happened? In 1918, I think it's a fascinating story. In 1918, immediately after the Balfour Declaration, Rav Menashe Grutzberg, okay, interesting, very, very, very interesting guy. Started in Eastern Europe, ended up in London, and over there he contacted Rabbi Kook. And in that letter that he writes to Rav Kook, he asks him several questions. And one of the questions is, are we allowed to build Beit HaMikdash and to bring sacrifices? And Rav Kook answers the following. There's no mitzvah to build Beit HaMikdash if we're not going to bring sacrifices. He quotes the Rambam. The Rambam says that the whole purpose of Beit HaMikdash, of building Beit HaMikdash, is to bring sacrifices. However, he said, even though it's not a mitzvah, I don't see a prohibition of building the temple even without bringing the korbanot. Okay? Is that clear? Okay. Now, then he goes into great details and he explains how can we bring korbanot even though we don't have the two main obstacles are the red heifer, right? And the lineage of the Kohanim. Let me explain for a second. Kohanim will understand, right? Only Kohanim can serve in the temple. They can do all the ritual, all that kind of stuff. What happened in 2,000 years? A lot of mix-up. we're not sure that even that today our Kohanim are really descendants of Aaron. Yes, the genetic testing, completely irrelevant. But because when it comes to halachic issues, we don't rely on that stuff. In other words, it's
I mean, it's interesting, the guy who's.
it's very interesting. It's very, very interesting. However, it's not a medical issue, you know, and if somebody doesn't have that gene,
Mhm.
it doesn't mean anything.
How are we gonna ever?
Lineage is only male after male.
I get it. Well, Kehuna also goes from
No, this
father
gene-
to son.
This gene gets passed down. from-
Yeah,
Right.
but depends on the wife.
I know, but that gene, that particular gene also passed only by males. So it's perhaps genetically, but from halakhic perspective is a bit different. Halakhic perspective says what we establish, we meaning people, the rabbis establish, is what counts.
So it's kind of.
There's-
Too, but some of the people who say, my father told me in a baseball game, I'm like, yeah, I don't know.
Right. So that's to some extent that is the problem. The problem is that okay. So for our rituals today, it's really not a big deal. So the guy, maybe he's not a direct descendant of Aaron the Kohen, got the first Aliyah on Shabbat, big deal. That person even gave Birkat Kohanim. Okay, what's the damage? It's not a big deal, right? However, the Torah is very clear. However, somebody who's not a Kohen that does the avodah, does the service in Beit HaMikdash, is liable for death. And that's a different story. So that's part of the problem. How do you? And we know that there were a lot of mix-ups, and we know that throughout history, some people actually bought that.
Oh, right.
There are a lot of interesting stories that certain families bought that, whatever, all sorts of stuff, and people that were Kohanim but they were not Kohanim, and people decided that they wanted to marry somebody who was a divorcee, like all sort of like stuff and whatever, and then because of that, so we don't really know who is a real Kohen today and who is not a Kohen, and definitely at the time of Rav Kook at 1918. So that was one big problem. How do you? Let's assume that you get the permission. Let's assume that you will build Beit HaMikdash. Now what? Who's going to do that? The Kohanim, we don't even know if they're real Kohanim. So that's obstacle number one. Obstacle number two. In order to bring the korbanot, you got to be tahor, you got to be pure. What is the process by which one is pure? You need the right heifer, the red heifer, right? It's the idea of the red cow and whatever, the whole ritual. And only one that was sprinkled with that, the ashes of the red heifer, blah, 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 whatever, with the water and the whole thing. That, right, we are all impure today, because how you get impure? I mean, the easiest way is, contact with a dead body. It's not only that. If I touch the body and you touched me, you're also impure already. Okay? So we're all in the state of impurity. So that's a problem. How do you bring korbanot in that state where, well, to some extent, that's also the solution. There's a halachic principle that says, Tuma utra b'tzibur. In other words, if everybody is impure, you can do that. So the whole idea of being pure, whatever, is applicable only if you still have people that are pure. But so Rav Kook deals with all those all those issues, and it tried to explain how it would be possible. We're talking about 1918. How it's possible to bring korbanot even with those two obstacles, even though, and he says, there's no mitzvah to build a Beit HaMikdash if not for the purpose of bringing korbanot. However, if we do that, there's no prohibition. And what can we do in order to do that? Fine. So that's his letter in 1918. 3 years later, 1921, Rav Kook writes an essay, halachic essay, very detailed, called Kedushat Mekom Mikdashenu Bazman Hazeh. Holiness or the sanctity of the place of the temple in our time. And here in this article, he analyzes the status of Har HaBayit, of Temple Mount, in terms of Kedusha, and also like the whole halachic liturgy, he details analyzes the whole thing. There's a famous major machloket debate between the Rambam and pretty much everybody else about the status of Har HaBayit. Most of the authorities claim that once the temple was destroyed, there's no, obviously it's a holy place, but it's not to that extent like when the temple is there. Meaning it's not that the holiness is there regardless to the temple. It depends on it. The Rambam says no. The Rambam says that once it was sanctified in the second time, it is automatically sanctified forever. And whether the temple is there or not is irrelevant. The sanctity of Temple Mount is who cares? What's the relevancy? What's what we saw Nafka Mina? Yeah.
Is this in Mishneh Torah?
No. Oh, yeah. He talks. I think in Mishneh Torah also.
Or in the
Hilchot Bet HaMikdash. Yeah. In Mishneh Torah. No, not in Moreh Nevuchim. In Mishneh Torah.
Building, because you have to know you can or cannot go in certain places.
Correct. And then, by the way, to some extent, this is the machloket that we have today. With you have those who claim you can go to Har HaBayit, to Temple Mount, and some rabbis said no. The official approach of the chief rabbinate of Israel that you're not allowed to go there. However, many other rabbis disagree and they say yes, you can. Right? If indeed the Rambam is right, then maybe you're not allowed to go.
This will be solved in Mashiach Zeiten, because then everyone will believe in one God, so they can go back.
Maybe, but that's where we're not talking about that. We're talking about like what we do now.
Yeah,
However, those who
that's why we cannot do anything, because it's only for the time.
that's your opinion, but not everybody.
No,
okay.
I mean it's one of the opinions.
That's one of the opinions. However, those who follow the other Shita, not the Rambam, say, well, the special sanctity of the place is connected to the building. Therefore, since the building is not there, it's a lower level of sanctity, and therefore we have the permission. We can go to Har HaBayit under certain conditions, certain places, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. So if I need to, like the nucleus of the debate that is even relevant today, this is it. Yes, Hannah?
That said, you build the Mikdash Anochi, ושכנתי בתוכו. But if it was destroyed,
So
God is not there anymore. So how come some people or some believe that this is holy?
what happened in the second one? We didn't get, like, God didn't tell us also anything, right? In the second one.
So how is our belief now? Something is, I don't understand.
The idea is that, the belief is that you do what you need to do, and God will bring the Shekhinah there.
Is it something that we will feel? Is it something that we will recognize? Or that we know when this is happening?
Well, that depends on, guys, if you're cold, you can move to, I don't know what happened there. It just came out.
About the air. Thank you. But it's not that hot, but it may be quite in the.
No, but this is separate. This is only here.
In the second temple, there were not even the Kohanim.
Question is,
No, there were not even the Kohanim of Bnei Aaron, direct descendants.
they were. The question is the question is how you define like all that stuff today, and and how you feel nevuah and how you feel like and all that kind of stuff. So look, the way I look at that, and I think I said it many times before, it's not about God's presence, it's about the form of that revelation, let's call it, okay, which is diminished, right? In the beginning, you had God talking to whatever, the Avot, later on to Moshe, right? Later on with the Nevi'im, it's not as clear as when God, by the Hashem and Moshe Lamor, A, B, C, D, E, right? It's a different form, right? And then later on, with the late Nevi'im, Chagai, Zechariah, it's even less. It talks to them even much less than Yeshayahu, Yirmiyahu, Yechezkel, right? So then in the generation, we believe that there's some sort of inspiration, let's call it, okay, and that's whether it's Tanaim and Amoraim and later on it's the Geonim and then you have so it's less of a revelation, it's more of a internalization of the information.
So it's almost like diminishing.
It's definitely diminishing on one level, but if it's diminishing on one level, but it's actually expanding in terms of our role, because we have a bigger role in interpreting. Right? The way I like to look at that is a relationship, a parent with a child. In the beginning, you have little kids, you have to do everything for them. As they grow, you take a step back. Okay? Until they basically are of the house, and then the hope is that you instill within that, with them enough information so they can do the right choices. But you don't tell them what to do because they're already adults. Well, Jewish mother always tell the kids what to do. But you know what I'm saying. Right? So this is the way I like to look at that. And we are in that generation that we don't have that. God doesn't talk to anyone, not even in Nevuah. We have no prophets. But we do believe that when a leader makes a decision based on the information and based on the learning, based on all the stuff that evolved coming from, to Moshe and to Yoshua and to Zkenim and all the whole throughout the generation, everything. So there's a form of inspiration that hopefully, that's what we would like to believe, we're learning here. We don't know. God didn't come to me and told me, right? 1 and 2. I would like to believe, I hope, that's my prayer, is that what I'm saying is what was the intent? I don't know. A lot of people will disagree with what we say here, right?
If we compare this, even if I'm completely out of line,
Yeah.
when Rachab put Hashani,
Yeah.
so we recognize this as a special kind of way. Is this the way that it goes from generation to generation until now? So actually, we are not in a decline. We keep it very strong. And
Correct.
continuing.
No, it's definitely continuing, but I said it's a different form. What the decline is, the level of revelation. It's hidden, it's internalized, it's by expanding our role rather than God talks to me directly and tells me what to do.
When a teacher teaches from his knowledge, we hope that it is L'Shem Shamayim.
Correct. What?
Hashem is with you everywhere.
Yes.
I remember the first time I went to Israel, we went to Israel. I went to the spot, to the Karo shul.
Yeah.
I had this feeling.
Okay. There are, I mean, I don't have to tell everybody experienced that, like, moments of inspiration and all that kind of stuff. But, but I can't tell you that this is a, revelation or a nevuah, that kind of stuff. Okay. Okay. Moving on. So from 1918 to 1921, there's a major difference in Rav Kook's approach. Right? If 1918, he says, like, we can build the Beit HaMikdash even before Mashiach comes. Not only that, he writes in that letter that he would like to be one of those people that build the Beit HaMikdash. However, in 1921, he's taking a much more passive approach. And he says, well, it depends when Mashiach comes. We need signs like Eliyahu Hanavi, stuff like that. Why? That's the question. And here's the answer. What happened in 1921? He became the chief rabbi of Israel. Right? In 1917, I think he was the chief rabbi of Tel Aviv. Right? Tel Aviv. In 1921, he became the chief rabbi of Israel. And that means that he is one of the officials of the Jewish community, representing the Jewish community, in all sorts of meetings or whatever with the British mandate. So he understands that whatever he says has a tremendous impact. He cannot say what he thinks anymore. He has to be much more careful. Everything has political influence. Everything has a political impact, whatever he's going to say. And if the chief rabbi of Israel is going to say, well, we should build Beit HaMikdash, there's no problem, there's no halachic problem of building Beit HaMikdash, I wish I, can do it tomorrow. Can you imagine, like, from a political standpoint, like what happens? It's a grenade.
About declaration, like almost immediately, there were people complaining.
No, I get it, but that's nothing to do with that. What I'm saying, like, the Balfour Declaration basically just brought all those questions to the surface, questions that nobody thought about for so many years. Okay, now, Rav Chaim Hirschensohn was born in Tzfat in 1857. One of the first families of Chovevei Tzion. Chovevei Tzion, if you remember, that was the movement from Eastern Europe that started coming to Israel even before the Aliyot. His family moved to Yerushalayim in 1864, and he went to yeshiva and everything and all that kind of stuff. And he saw himself as kind of a modern guy, very orthodox, but still a modern guy that, what we call today modern Orthodox, whatever that means. Fine. In 1903, he leaves Israel and he goes to America, and he becomes a rabbi in a community in Hoboken, New Jersey. And he stays there as the rabbi until his passing in 1935. And he writes very, very clear. He writes a whole series of books, whatever. And when it comes to the issue of Beit HaMikdash, he writes the following. He says that the overall atmosphere in the world is not conducive for such activity as korbanot. And therefore, there's no problem of building Beit HaMikdash, but without the korbanot. Then in the second chapter, he deals with whether you can go into Temple Mount and all that kind of stuff. And while all the rabbis after the Rambam basically gave a psak just like the Rambam, i.e., that one is not allowed to go to Temple Mount, and that was, kind of like the standard, right? And even like the chief rabbinate of Israel, even today, that's their approach. They say, so Rabbi Hirschhorn quotes the Ravad, who is a contemporary of the Rambam, who had a dispute with the Rambam and said, no, you can do that. You can do that under certain conditions and all that kind of stuff. That is the origin, by the way, for many of the rabbis today that claim that you can go to Temple Mount. Okay? And by the way, the numbers of Jews going to Temple Mount is growing by the second. It's the like studies shown that it goes like in thousands of percents every year. Thousands of percents every year. So all that comes from him. I mean, him quoting the Ravad, okay. And what he basically says that there's no problem going to Har HaBayit, there's no problem with building Beit HaMikdash, but Beit HaMikdash is not going to have any korbanot in it. What is going to be? It's going to be a place, an academy where everybody is going to learn the ways of God, call it monotheism, I don't know, whatever that is, the principles of justice and whatever you want to call it, all that kind of stuff, for both Jews and non-Jews. Now, so, and he listed is a place of, by the way, not only of monotheism but it's also of music, by the way, and that's going to be also the Supreme Court, and that's going to be a place of prayer for all religions. And he says it's also going to be like some sort of I guess like court, the Supreme Court for human rights, international court for human rights, and that kind of stuff. That's basically what he is, and he calls it the Hechal Shalom, I guess the Temple of Peace. Where does it come from? That name, Hechal Shalom, Temple of Peace, found in the Altnoid land, written by Herzl. Herzl talks, he doesn't talk about the temple, but he talks about this building, that entity that is going to serve as a spiritual center, human rights and all kind of stuff in that land. By the way, Herzl and no place talks about Israel even. Forget about Yerushalayim. It's a fiction, of course. It's right. Okay, so Rav Kook and Rav Hirschhorn dealt with this idea of the temple, the third temple, from the halachic aspect, and Herzl deal with that. By the way, his book Altnoid Land was published in 1903. He's dealing with that from, let's call it, a national perspective, perhaps. Definitely.
Tel Aviv.
What?
Amakor Hashem Tel Aviv.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, so Herzl has description of that place, the Temple of Peace, that is going to be a center for I don't know, I guess kind of some sort of a UN something or whatever, all that kind of stuff, whatever, and help between nations and the place where music is going to inspire all the world. And but he was talking, by the way, Herzl was talking about songs like Henry Heine's songs, not necessarily Jewish songs. So Herzl, just to kind of like understand, he, in his vision, he sees a Jewish but very secular state, right? And he was afraid of the religious groups who would be interested in building a temple that would incorporate korbanot, which he saw as something primitive. And therefore, his format was something like a reform temple on steroids, kind of a thingy to build. So, but interesting, if you look at what Hirschensohn and what Herzl, if you compare the two, he basically, Hirschensohn took Herzl's idea and brought it into like a real plan within the halachic parameters. So Hirschensohn sends his book to Rav Kook. He sends it to Rav Kook, and in a letter back, Rav Kook in 1919 completely crushes everything in the book that Hirschensohn wrote. He said, absolutely not. He said, there's no justification of building Beit HaMikdash without writing korbanot. So it's interesting, by the way, that later on in his Siddur, I don't remember what time, when was his Siddur, Olat HaRaya. I don't remember what year it was published. Rav Kook writes that, which we know, I mentioned that before, that even in the third temple, the only type of korban that is going to be brought is the one korban min hatzomech. That means only the grain offering, not animal sacrifice. Yeah. So there's either was like kind of interesting discussions about that stuff. I have we have 6 minutes or so. Okay, so next week we're going to continue delving into the details of Beit HaMikdash, right? This is going to be chapter 43. Just want to double check myself. 43, right? Yeah. Okay. We have to start thinking of what we're doing after completing that book, which is going to be in a couple of weeks, and after chapter 48. We still have like a bunch of stuff to cover, but if anyone has any ideas,
We must stay at the same level.
I'm sorry, what?
We stay at the same level.
At the same level. What does it mean?
Right.
Yeah, of course. Of course. Of course. Okay. So this is kind of like what at least I found is interesting stuff about the third temple. Perhaps a little bit more relevant to our times. I'm just curious. Anyone been to Temple Mount? You went? Oh. First of all, Americans, there's no problem at all. Like you say, I'm an American tourist, there's not a problem at all. Yeah, Israelis of course, you can't come with, kippah or tzitzit, kind of stuff that they're not going to let you.
So all the families that are on series can go there, they're not that deep.
No. They a lot of the families count. They go with a baseball cap, and that's it. They don't
For
let you
many years,
daven
I
there.
didn't go.
It's very, very like weird.
For many years, I didn't go, and then I decided I was starting to think for myself.
I'm like, I find it very interesting. Like, I mean, I'm curious, but on the other hand, I'm curious about a lot of other things first. Like, it's not something that is like really burning. And since it's a machloket, it is a machloket, it's a debate, it's a halachic debate. If it was something that really like, burning, so I would, probably make a decision and just, do that. But since it's not, I'm kind of like staying on the safe side, and I'm saying to myself, not safe from in terms of security, but in terms of like halachic debate, not interested in getting into this doubt whether who's going to take it. The only one who can take it is my wife. No one can take it. It's not something that you can take from somebody. No. And by the way, there are tons of rabbis who go.
Well,
I don't think that I went very close to the Even Ashtiyah, because if you believe it's the Kodesh or Kodashim, we shouldn't go. Then, I mean, it wasn't all over. For me, the southern steps, Lamikdash, that were much later excavated, are more holy than the Western Wall, because that's so I mean, I don't negate the Western Wall. That was all we had.
Okay. So next week, same time, same place, unless sometimes is it Hanukkah already? The day before. Okay, fine. Okay. Next week. Okay, we'll continue with the text itself.
Thank you.